Today, everyone play game. Anyone that have a phone, right? Anyone that have a computer, anyone that go online.
Video gaming has gone through a revolution. More than just a teenage pastime, it has emerged as the new mass audience entertainment genre.
The game never really leaves your brain. You basically live and breathe the game. You don't get a time to do anything else.
By dominating our screens and our time, games are producing generations of consumers and are directly influencing our behavior.
We have billions of downloads, but not the whole population in the world has played the game, so there are still some work to be done.
The gaming industry has become a mass media, one of the pillars of a permanently connected society. It has accumulated billions of personal data details, for the fun of the game or for the lure of profit. Video gaming has changed dimension. It has left the bedroom and lounge for the stadium. It has also changed its name and is now known as electronic sport or esport. It brings together tens of thousands of fans during official tournaments. This is the last step in a cultural coup d'etat led by a whole generation.
When you see the players go out and like touch all the people's hands, that's something you see at a rock show, like the Beatles did that, and Pink Floyd did that, and Freddie Mercury did that. I would have never thought, a gamer is going to be doing that same kind of thing. It just seems, almost like a joke.
Nowadays, esport draws inspiration from professional sport. Players are recruited as teenagers and funded by sponsors. They train for 10 hours a day in secret and earn several thousand euros a month. Their playing field is a screen where they confront each other in teams. In League of Legends, one of the world's most popular games, the winners must destroy the enemy base using swords and magic powers. With electronic sport, gaming suddenly got serious.
I took part in the first edition of the World Finals. We were playing in Sweden in front of about 100 people. A year later, they organized a whole lot of tournaments, and the scene really grew. For example, if you finished in first place, it was $50,000 for the first edition, but for the second edition, that had gone up to $1 million.
First emerging in South Korea, in the space of a few years, electronic sport has become a mass phenomenon. Tournaments attract tens of millions of fans on the web. This illustrates the domination of gaming over the entertainment industry. For a long time, a marginal aspect of the culture industries, video games took more than 30 years to emerge from the shadows. But every year now in Los Angeles, gaming rules the roost. The sector generates annual revenues of close to 100 billion euros, more than either the film or music industries, and far outstripping publishing. Gaming used to be looked down on by the rest of the entertainment sector. so it developed on the margins, writing its own rules along the way.
You will feel the weight of the weapon in your hand, the crash as you block the attack, and the impact when you strike the winning blow.
Back in the day, we could produce a game for 200,000 or 300,000 francs. Then that went up to 200,000 or 300,000 euros. Now we spend between 70 and 100 million, and the marketing budget is another 30 to 60 million. So the cost is close to what you see now in the movie industry.
When I started out, it was called garage gaming. 4 buddies eating pizza, shut up in a garage for 6 months. And they came out with a video game. Today it's software development. There are engineers and a team, a production organization. Several hundred people working together, sometimes all around the world in different sites. There's a real industrial approach to producing video games.
The Los Angeles trade show is an orgy of screens, computer-generated images, and pumping decibels. It is the gaming equivalent of the Cannes Film Festival. It is the showcase of an industry that is flexing its muscles on the world stage. To cultivate their reputation, publishers show off their family games based on music, dancing, and simulation, the good, clean, fun side of the industry. But the mega productions which dominate the market are games involving sport, war, and action. They are the equivalent of movie blockbusters, the stars of a culture pumped up on testosterone. Technically dazzling, these titles push back the boundaries of the imagination and draw players into mesmerizing parallel worlds.
Stunning. We made it, Dad.
Video games are a way of knowing that another world exists. Through the various formats, one can experience something different than the real world. That's what happens when you read a book, and also when you listen to music or watch a film. In the same way, through video games, I can try out various universes. And above all, I can live this through my personal experience. That is the power of video games.
The gamers have become adults, and video games grew up with them. Thanks to the spread of internet, the last decade saw the advent of games operating round the clock, in which millions of permanently connected players compete in contests that never end. Video games now took on the form of vast communities. One game illustrates this convergence with the internet, World of Warcraft. In this role-play game, participants have to join a team known as a guild, accomplish missions, and obey chiefs. Every month, they pay a subscription of 10 to 15 euros to continue their existence in the group.
I don't think we have imagined, an active player community at one point in excess of 12 million players. When we launched the product, we had hopes that we would see an active player community of 1 million people. Like all these sorts of things that have come as a result of the success of World of Warcraft, no one was thinking about.
In terms of appearance, video games had achieved the impossible, inventing an ideal world far from the tedium of daily life, a global language, a culture that can be consumed by all.
Super Pete. Here we go.
But what if this rosy image was misleading? What if, on the contrary, the game masters were exploiting our primary urges? Competition, domination, destruction.
What does young men like in terms of film genre? They like horror film, they like thriller film, they like sci-fi film, they like action, they like adventure. A lot of time it's the unnecessary violence made me feel twitched. It's like, really? Do you really need to do that? I think in the end it's about how you use violence rather than violence as a whole is bad.
Do people want violent games because that is what is offered to them? If we offered more original experiences, would we open up the market or not?
Violence has been a core feature of video games since they began. Initially pioneered by Japanese mangas, it has long been represented in a fantasy form similar to cartoons. Some creators have made it their trademark. One such company is Suda51, the Quentin Tarantino of video game world, known for its bloodthirsty aestheticism.
There's a desire to do what cannot be done in the real world. I think that's what is attractive in violent games. Personally, I try to create games which mess with our instincts. The borderline between the real world and that of video games must be clearly defined. And yet that barrier is fragile nowadays. I'm afraid of the day when that boundary will disappear.
Enhanced by technology, the representation of violence entered a race towards hyperrealism. It led to a cultural gulf opening up between gamers and the wider public. The debate crystallized around one of the biggest-selling games in the world. GTA stands for Grand Theft Auto, cop speak for car crime. GTA encapsulates punk culture in an interactive environment. Moving through a cityscape resembling New York or Los Angeles, the player's aim is to become a crime lord. He can act with apparent impunity, robbing and killing innocent people and police.
Pourquoi l'importance de GTA, c'est que c'est...
GTA took off because it's an excellent game. Whether in terms of the quality of the dialogue, the quality of the narratives, or the humor. GTA is the most cutting, the most caustic critique of the ills of contemporary society. Above all, it offers total freedom to do what you want. It's a sort of anarchic escape valve that is quite extraordinary. You should see teens playing GTA.
Video games, in a way, are much more about responsibility, because it's about, you made this violence happening. You made this violence happen. What are you going to do about it? How does that make you feel? You have much more of a weight of responsibility when you play a game than when you watch a movie. You're complicit in the actions that happen in a game.
What's wrong with me today?
And so this means that the video games are actually also a very good medium for exploring responsibility.
Do games encourage violence? Or on the contrary, do they act as a way of releasing our urges?
If I ask you to play a violent video game for 10 to 15 minutes, for the following 5 to 10 minutes, you'll have a tendency to be more aggressive from a cognitive point of view. You'll have more aggressive thoughts and be more aggressive from a physical point of view. If someone bumps into you in the corridor, you'll tend to respond in a more aggressive way. This is a fact that everyone accepts. But if you continue playing a violent game every day, do all these short periods during which you increase your aggressiveness give rise to a change in your personality? And that has led to a huge debate, with one camp that says yes and another that says no.
What about you?
I can tell you I don't know. We're looking at it very closely.
Scientists have been called upon to examine the impact of violent games on the human brain. In Geneva, Professor Bavelier is carrying out a series of experiments to measure the attention capacity of players, in other words, their ability to concentrate.
For example, if you go out with your 10 grandchildren into a garden and you try to follow them as they run all over the place, it's going to be difficult to follow all 10 at the same time. And that's because there's a limit to our capacity to pay attention to objects. And that limit is usually about 4 objects to which we can pay attention.
The game consists of attentively following the path of the blue dots once they join the mass of yellow dots. You then have to say what the original color of the dot was when the question mark appears. You try. Answer: blue.
For a long time, it was believed that the limit was fixed, with the attention capacity among adults of 4, plus or minus 1 object. Then it was seen that this could be changed and increased. People who play action video games have an attention capacity for objects that is between 6 and up to 9 objects.
Published in the prestigious scientific review Nature in 2003, these findings overturned the conventional view. Not only did they suggest there was no direct link between violent games and violent behavior, but games could improve our vision and our capacity to process a large flow of information.
No one in the video game industry was aware that they were developing such tools. They thought they were developing entertainment tools. They had no idea of the impact this could have on players.
Having shed its image as a toxic form of entertainment, video gaming took full advantage. It became synonymous with progress and operated at the cutting edge of technology. It even began to attract major Hollywood names like Steven Spielberg. When it came to test virtual reality, he gave the industry the seal of approval it had been seeking for a long time.
Are you ready?
That's not fair.
Oh, I got it.
He thought it was fantastic. He didn't think things would move so fast. Games force you to think, requiring decision-making and attention, which means you have a more developed, more attentive brain.
Once scorned, gamers were now sought after by the corporate world.
Those who do the hiring at Boeing like to take video game players because they're used to handling 3D, navigating their position in the world, and also within a group.
They'd almost rather hire someone who is a guild leader than a Harvard graduate, which shows that this world we call virtual is not as virtual as we think.
Video games invaded the campus, becoming a subject for study. It marked the triumph of Generation G, G for gamers, those who identified with a magic number, 10,000 hours. According to one American study, this was the amount of time a player had spent in front of a screen by the age of 21. In other words, as much time as spent studying at secondary school.
We can see a whole generation which is capable of growing in power. And what is very interesting at the moment is the way this system is destabilizing the fundamentals on which our culture has been based for the past 100 years.
20 years ago, when you said you're a gamer, people will associate you with the name nerds. You're a guy, you're a techie, you're a geek. In fact, gamers today don't even relate themselves as gamer. So the gamer definition and the demographic have changed a lot.
Generation G dreamed of conquering the world, of turning the millions of players into billions. But part of the population was not playing along, females, especially adults. Despite their diversity, video games remained a masculine pastime. In 2007, the first cell phones connected to the internet appeared on the market.
We're going to be rolling out the iPhone 3G at the same time in all of these countries.
It was an immediate success. Gamers now had the magic bullet to win over a female clientele.
We had a goal that we want to make a game that is playable for all around the world. So it's kind of like we wanted to create this universal game that the kids can play, but also the adults can play it. You just take it and you will definitely get it.
Catapulting birds onto green pigs to destroy them was the scenario dreamed up by a Finnish startup. The result was Angry Birds. A simple concept, a handful of engineers, a launch on a global scale, and the Angry Birds wave broke onto screens, carried along by social media.
This provided what might be called mega distribution, worldwide distribution. It gave any developer, whether a very big company or two guys in a garage, the ability to go from 0 players to 50 million or 100 million in a year or a year and a half. And that didn't exist before in the area of games. Before, you had to have big companies, armies of developers, offices in every country, and sell boxes in physical stores. That kind of business is becoming extinct.
With 2 billion downloads, Angry Birds converted women to video games, at the same time making them a planetary phenomenon. They were now available in your pocket, anywhere, anytime. This revolution spread at the rate of a virus, transforming an entertainment form into a mass medium.
They would spend anywhere from 3 minutes to 7 minutes per game session. Morning, on transit, having a breakfast, in the washroom, after lunch. During 4 or 5 p.m., pretty much before dinner, you will still see casual gaming crowd playing games.
Casual gaming, involving occasional players, became the new face of the industry. Titles like Candy Crush and Clash of Clans soon took up half the game market. This industry operates according to a Darwinian principle. Many candidates, few who will survive. Casual gaming embraced the culture of zapping.
We find that most players will give anywhere from 45 seconds to 2 minutes when they download your game. So if you lost them in that duration, you likely lost them forever. So if you need to explain, you won't have time to explain. In that 45 to 2 minutes, you have to reach to a point which is they're like, oh, this is fun.
The obsession of these armies of developers was to incite potential players to engage. They discarded the pay model, replacing with the free-to-play. The priority became winning over new people, with a view to converting them into customers.
What we're seeing in Europe is that even the terminology free-to-play is being questioned. Is this false advertising? Because it's certainly not free. It's free to access, but at certain points, you have to pay.
How do you trigger the impulse to buy? How do you convert visitors into consumers? Women became the most coveted target because they were seen as most profitable. Among startups, programmers were building sophisticated mechanics to incite them to always spend more. They offer the purchase of bonuses or additional powers to be used in the game. These microtransactions, never more than €1, but multiplied endlessly, end up generating fortunes.
Quite a few people who I trained now work for video game companies where they use their know-how to understand what makes a player come back and play a game several times, and what is appealing about a game the first time to make someone buy it.
How do you encourage people to buy? Quite simply, they try to push you through social pressure. They say to you, this person who you like, or on the contrary, and this works even better, this person who you hate just went above you in the rankings. Now is the moment to buy a multiplier to win more points and go back ahead of them. But if you looked at your neighbor's screen, you'd see that in fact you've kept your place in the rankings and the other person is below you. The game just lied to you to make you buy so you could go back up in the rankings.
In the space of a few years, the game masters have transformed the profile of gamers. Nowadays, the typical player is an urban mother in her 40s.
When I ask my wife, do you think you're a gamer? I'm like, no. But I'm like, you have played games. You have played like games like Angry Bird, you play games like Fruit Ninja, you play games like, Candy Crush, and you don't consider yourself a gamer? No, I don't consider myself a gamer.
Angry Birds have become the new heroes of pop culture. Cartoons, children's books, theme parks, they have even made it into space. Angry Birds have killed Mickey.
I want to do some physics demonstrations that involve some of the things you might see in the Angry Birds game. And of course, I've got my Angry Bird here.
The lords of casual gaming have joined the internet giants in the globalization paradise. Their stock price rockets. And the free model, operating as a formidable accelerator for game consumption, has turned the planet into a huge casino.
We're talking about companies which make hundreds of millions of dollars in profit every quarter. There aren't many industries in a world in recession where you can manage that. And yet the products are free. The games themselves are free. If you want to play Clash of Clans tomorrow, it won't cost you a dime. It's amazing.
By attracting the female demographic, the industry has extended its reach. But nonetheless, it remains a male bastion. The game studios are all run by men, and the games produced for boys peddle the worst stereotypes.
It used to be you would go to an industry conference and it would be like a car show. And what I mean is they would have booth babes, which is the term they use in the industry for models, female models, dressed in short skirts and in tight tops, draped across technology. They have started to talk about it and have tried to ban it, but it still happens.
Within this industry, the only place for women is as consumers, as if Generation G is incapable of growing up.
It's still a huge challenge to create a game around a female character. When we created this game called Beyond, in which the main character is played by Ellen Page, we heard players tell us, I have no desire to be a girl in a video game. They come right out and say it.
The issue is not just to have more female characters or more diverse, racially diverse characters within games, it's also to look at what those characters do in the games and what role they play in the narrative. If you want to be a global media industry, you need to take care of things like that.
Deaf to such criticism, the industry just plows ahead. Every day, hundreds of new games come onto the market. The key is to keep feeding the screens and brains, whatever the cost. So have you stolen the housewife age 50 away from her TV screen?
Our objective is always to take them away from other distractions, because they exist and they have activities. So our objective is to provide a more interesting activity than what the television has to offer, and from which we can generate revenue.
We realize that we're fighting for one thing. We're fighting for people's time. People have a fixed amount of leisure time, which is not infinitely extendable.
Conquering the free time of humans, that is the true aim of this industry. Snatching the minutes and hours spent outside or at home, alone or in a group, or with the family. After cinema, the video game is challenging television. And this battle, in which time is money, is being played out on the sports field.
Anytime that you are watching TV or going to the movies or anything else, that's competition for us. What we have tried to do is create a way of reliving those moments when you're not watching the football matches. And so the time between the 90 minutes of a football match that you're watching can be filled with something that's, you know, as compelling, as exciting, as competitive as real sports.
Sport has long been the reserve of television, but even that is now available in a virtual version. By hiring the services of soccer stars like Pelé and Lionel Messi, the studios have constructed an alternative reality, almost an identical copy, but one which can be enjoyed without constraints or limits. In this war of screens, who will stop the video game?
We've gone from 500 million customers to almost 2 billion now, and growth is continuing at a good pace.
2 billion players on the planet.
That's right.
Out of a population of 7.5 billion.
Absolutely. And I think that in 10 years, we'll have more like 80 to 90% of the planet who'll play a game at some point.
So for you, it's not yet the golden age?
No. No, we're right at the beginning, because we've just started all walking around with a computer in our pocket all day, and therefore with an opportunity to play games. So we're really at the early stages of the video game industry.
Armed with this new power, the business is for the first time having to face up to its responsibilities.
Games are very powerful tools for changing people's behavior. Anybody who's seen someone play World of Warcraft, or in the case of my mom, Candy Crush, for hours and hours knows how addictive and engaging games can be.
Some Asian countries have decided to fight back against this excess influence. In South Korea, legislation known as the Cinderella Law imposes an online curfew for the under 16s. They are banned from connecting to play online between midnight and 6 in the morning. The Chinese government, which long ago banned game consoles on its territory, has also put its youth under surveillance.
The government has imposed time limits within the games themselves. So for people aged under 18, after a few hours, the game stops. When they register, each customer has to provide proof of identity. If the person is a minor, after 3 hours, the speed with which they move through the game is halved. After 5 hours, the player can no longer make any progress. So young people are no longer interested in playing all day long.
In the West, concern centers on a different area, that of the message. The aim is to make these virtual pastimes more than just entertainment. In Alaska, an indigenous tribe has taken the unprecedented decision to use a game to pass on its heritage.
They kept thinking about video games because their youth were playing video games. They didn't really know anything about the market or making video games, but they wanted to explore whether they could actually start the first indigenous video game company.
Never Alone tells the story of the Inuit language, the adventures of a young Eskimo and her friend, a polar fox, in search of the original source of storms. Never Alone has been downloaded several million times and has become the symbol of a successful alliance between the past and the future.
On any given week, there's billions of hours of video games being played across the planet. The socio-cultural impact is huge. We're just beginning to understand it.
What we're interested in is understanding how we can use this as an educational tool. We know that in schools we're starting to see attention problems among children, and that the way information is presented is not always the most attractive or stimulating.
Let's start off by getting in, following the instructions that are up onto the board.
Games are experience engines where you can take on an identity, go into a problem space, get feedback, solve a problem, constantly iterate, fail safely. They're great learning engines.
There was very strong interest from the White House to make the video game industry understand that their help was needed. They have an impact on society, and they have to play more of a partner role.
I want you guys to be stuck on a video game that's teaching you something, other than just blowing something up.
Video games are now being hailed at the White House. 10 years after accusing them of perverting youth, the American authorities have radically changed their stance. Every year, the presidency organizes a creativity competition open to all schools in the country.
It's really cool, though.
Thanks.
How long did it take you to design it?
A couple months.
Uh-huh. So you want to be a game designer?
Maybe.
Yeah? Yeah, you're only 5th grade. You don't have to make up your mind now. You got time to decide.
Using the mechanisms of games to communicate differently is known as gamification. After schools, it's the turn of medicine to experiment in this field. For example, to facilitate patient rehabilitation.
That's been the best tool. It was fun to do, so that meant you didn't feel like you were working.
The video game has become the equal of other communication tools, a new media in its own right. The industry discovered the extent of its influence, so-called soft power. The U.S. Army was one of the first institutions to employ this tool to win hearts and minds. After the attacks of 9/11, it created a war simulation game in which the player has to defend the Star-Spangled Banner from terrorists.
Was it an active recruiting tool? Yes. Was it presented as a recruiting tool? No, it was clearly another way to excite people about getting on board to join the fight, and in response to the 9/11 strikes, that we have a real war going on, real terrorists, real bad guys. Kids love it. The younger generation plays games, and America's Army is one of the games they play.
They were arriving with tanks and had public relations kind of spectacles with helicopters promoting this heavily as a new game. So America's Army was a success. I think it was a success for the US military, yes.
America's Army opened up a new prospect, transforming the game into an instrument of propaganda. Others followed suit. The Chinese army distributed a game which involved beating Japanese invaders, their historic enemy. Even Hezbollah in Lebanon sought to popularize its war against Israel through a game in which the bad guys wear the uniform of the Israeli army.
Are we creating a desire for war? Not at all. We're creating warriors. We're creating those people and those potential soldiers who are going to be important to defending our way of life, if that time comes.
So who are the bad guys in the game?
They're usually nondescript. We don't particularly pick a country or a nationality. It is just a bad guy organization.
But it's possible to choose to play the enemy?
No, you cannot choose to play the enemy. You can only choose to be yourself, to be an American soldier.
Got your six,
The villain in the video game of the 90s was the Nazi, because no one's going to question the idea of taking on the Nazis. But after 9/11, it's no accident that suddenly 15 games are released in which the villains were in Arab countries. Now the threat is gradually shifted towards Russia. So there's an obvious political element.
You ever ask yourself how this part of the world gets so fucked up all the time?
An acknowledged instrument of modern soft power, the video game must respond to criticism of a new type. These concern the wider impact of the message.
General perceptions of the Arab world never seem to accurately represent our story, presenting me as some supersized, bearded, brown-skinned terrorist. Lack of diversity in content is dangerous. From producers to consumers, no one is safe from this danger.
Now we're talking about the representations, the storylines of major games. We're now asking the same questions we would ask about other media. To me, that is video games becoming part of the mainstream.
Not wishing to miss out in this battle of communication, China has invested massively in the sector. Tencent, the Chinese equivalent of Facebook, has made numerous acquisitions, notably taking control of League of Legends, the flagship esport title, and has its own plans to conquer the world.
When you compare us with other foreign companies, in terms of revenue, you can see that Tencent far outstrips them. But we don't have much success in foreign markets with our games. So the next step is not only to continue to grow revenue, but also to boost our influence on the international stage.
The Tencent Group wants to join the world's internet giants, who spend fortunes to preserve their dominant market position. Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, and above all, Google and Apple. 2/3 of the revenue on their download platforms comes from video games. But this confrontation reveals another ambition, a long way from the world of games.
You have the major players who have links into computers and software, links into the internet, links into social media. You cannot look at an area of the media today and not see a games company or a company that has interests in games.
The ogre this is really feeding is big data. That means that suddenly, game publishers are now in a position, and this wasn't the case at all a few years ago, to control, to observe, and spy on the behavior of all their players, minute by minute.
Thanks to the billions of pieces of personal data they are collecting, the game operators are weaving a widespread surveillance system for players.
We just put a system in place which tracked when people put the disc in the console and switched it on and started to play, and when they switched it off, just so we could see how many people were playing.
That's quite a considerable step. That means they have a very good idea of what works and what doesn't. They know very well what time you start to play, what time you stop, why you stopped, and that goes on endlessly all the time.
But what do the publishers do with all that?
I'd ask you the same thing. It's a very good question. What do they do with it? I think they use it quite extensively.
Énormément.
They dearly want all this information because it serves their purposes. Do people play more in general when it's sunny? Do they play when it's raining and they're stuck at home bored? They know that stuff, and they're going to profit from it. They'll push it further. They may exaggerate this behavior by doing a little promo on a rainy day to encourage people even more into a purchasing act.
People often think, oh, it's just games, it's just play, so there can't really be anything too bad going on there. But I want to know what is being done with the data. I want to know about the privacy issues. And I want to know about what kind of spaces we're creating when they become networked and online, and how do we manage those spaces.
What happened in gaming 3 to 4 years ago, the social mobile aspect, is now happening in e-commerce and is also happening in the media. So nowadays, all companies are starting to think like game companies because they are the most sophisticated companies.
It's simple. We're in the process of plugging a computer into our arms. In fact, we're entering a world where, in the end, data will have an influence on our lives.
The masters of the video game have shattered the established cultural order. By working their way into the daily life of billions of humans, they have built up an unrivaled power. It is impossible to know what the consequences will be, since this phenomenon is still too recent. But gamers risk seeing their dreams of freedom robbed. It's not game over. And now, it is about much more than entertainment.